In 2007, an anonymous user made a post to the infamous 4chan. Said user posted a picture of this sculpture with accompanying text that described the sculpture as a creature called SCP-173. The creature is as still as a statue when observed, but moves to kill when no one is watching it, similar to the Weeping Angels from Doctor Who. The people of 4chan were intrigued, and some of them contributed by writing their own SCPs. Over time, so many were written that an entire website dedicated to archiving SCPs was made. Over the years, more and more SCPs were written to the point where there are thousands of entries. I've been a fan of the SCP Foundation for a few years now, and I decided to celebrate this year's Halloween by making a list of my personal favorite SCPs. However, I don't just want to make this a favorites video, I also want to make a basic introduction video for anyone watching who isn't familiar with the SCP Foundation. Killing two birds with one stone, as they like to say. Before I give my list of favorite SCPs, I'll be giving a brief background on the lore of the SCP Foundation. Now, important disclaimer, this is going to be a very simplified and basic look over the lore elements, specifically ones I deemed relevant to this video. This was done to keep from confusing and overwhelming newcomers to the community. If you would like a more detailed breakdown of SCP lore, I recommend checking out the Vulcan's video on the subject. It's pretty lengthy, but it's worth checking out if you want more details. Now for the basics. The SCP Foundation is a fictitious organization dedicated to the capture and study of dangerous anomalies around the world, called SCPs. SCPs can be creatures, objects, locations, even ideas or words. But what does SCP stand for? Well, SCP can stand for Secure, Contain, Protect, the Foundation's motto, or it could stand for Special Containment Procedures. I like to think of it this way. The individual SCPs are referred to Special Containment Procedures, more on that shortly, but the Foundation as a whole is called the Secure, Contain, Protect Foundation. This isn't official, it's just how I like to think of it. The SCP Foundation takes a unique approach to storytelling, clinical documents. The official format is as follows. Item number, such as SCP-123. Object class, which I'll go into more detail shortly. Special Containment Procedures, how to contain the SCP. Description, giving details about what the SCP is, how it behaves, etc. And finally, optional supplements, such as interviews, experiments, etc. The unique format gives the SCP Foundation a bureaucratic, cold, and inhuman feel, although there are tales on the site which follow a more traditional narrative structure. As for object classes, this is going to be one of the instances where I simplify things for the video. There are 11 object classes total, but I'll only be going over 5 for this video. Safe, Euclid, Keter, Apollyon, and Thamiel. If you wish to learn more about the other object classes, there will be resources in the description to help you do so. There is a common misconception that object class is determined by how dangerous an SCP is, due to the safe classification. However, this isn't necessarily the case. Object class is determined by how easy an SCP is to keep in containment. Just because an SCP is classified safe doesn't mean it isn't dangerous. For instance, SCP-330. SCP-330 appears to be a normal bowl of candy. However, if you take more than 2 pieces at a time, your hands will be severed by an unknown force and you will severely bleed out. While it doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to deduce that this is dangerous, it isn't exactly hard to contain a bowl of candy. This is where the box test comes in. If you put an SCP in a box, leave it alone, and nothing happens, it's most likely safe. If you put an SCP in a box, leave it alone, but you don't know what will happen, it's most likely Euclid. If you put an SCP in a box, leave it alone, but it can easily escape, it's most likely Keter. As for the other 2 classes I mentioned, Apollyon SCPs are SCPs that are impossible to contain. Thamiel SCPs are SCPs that provide some benefit to the Foundation, such as containing other SCPs. It's interesting to note that the SCP Foundation has no official canon. Make no mistake, individual SCPs have backstories, but there's no overarching narrative linking them all together. The lack of an official canon makes the Foundation as a whole open to interpretation, allowing for more creative input and flexibility. This is the most important with SCP-001. Newcomers to the site may be confused to find multiple SCPs labeled 001. This is because SCP writers back in the day had a hard time deciding which 001 proposal should be the 001. They decide to compromise by saying there is no official 001. The reader gets to choose which 001 proposal is the real 001. I won't go over every 001 proposal, but I will provide a few examples. Twisted Gear's Cactus's proposal, the Broken God. A deity named Mechane whose body was rebuilt by a cult in Mexico, resulting in catastrophic damage. This is before nuclear weapons were invented, so it wasn't until another SCP-2399 came along and destroyed Mechane. The Foundation now keeps the pieces of his body separate to keep him from rebuilding and keep a close eye on his followers, their Church of the Broken God. Quantum's proposal, the Lock. A locket that is impossible to open or destroy. The lock emits radiation that is identical to the cosmic microwave background, implying the lock contains the universe itself. And this isn't a conclusion the Foundation came to through tests, this is one of the first things they discovered about it, but they still tried to open and destroy it. Why would they do that? This thing contains the universe itself. Let's smash it with the hammer! Harmony's Proposal 2, the Conspiracy. This SCP-001 proposal is a bullet, but not just any bullet, it is the bullet that killed President Kennedy in 1963. What makes the bullet special, other than it was used to kill the president, is that, quote, upon impact, human perception began falling out of sync with objective reality on an individual level. Or in other words, JFK's assassination is the last objective moment in history. This SCP basically makes a narrative out of the whole JFK assassination theory, which, regardless of how you think of the theory itself, the SCP around it is pretty interesting. If you're curious to see every 001 proposal, I'll provide a link to a YouTube video on the subject in the description below. Another important element of SCP lore is the D-Class. D-Class is just a nice way to say human guinea pigs. D-Class personnel are prisoners on death row who are secretly taken by the Foundation and subjected to dangerous and inhumane experiments involving SCPs. The inclusion of D-Class is meant to add moral ambiguity to the Foundation. The SCP Foundation isn't good or bad. If it were characterized, the SCP Foundation would be more of an anti-hero. The Foundation does undeniable good by containing dangerous SCPs, but do the ends justify the means? The O5 Council would probably say yes. Speaking of which, the O5 Council is in charge of the Foundation. All 13 members have full access to all information on all SCPs. The identities of the members are classified. They are only referred to by numbers 1 through 13. And with that out of the way, let's get into the real meat and potatoes of this video, the SCPs themselves. I'm going to list a few SCPs that I find interesting. I'll be describing their anomalous properties as well as their object classes. With that out of the way, let's begin with... The Gate Guardian is a humanoid entity standing at 700 cubits. The Guardian has several wings, but there is no accurate count of how many wings it has. The Guardian carries a giant burning sword that's hotter than the sun itself. As you can imagine, someone with a giant burning sword probably should be left alone, but the SCP Foundation, being the SCP Foundation, decided not to do that. If you walk up to the Guardian, he'll just tell you to piss off, and it's not possible for anyone to disobey the Guardian's instructions, so you gotta walk away. If you attempt to do something stupid like attack the Guardian, he'll use his mighty sword to decimate you, which the Foundation would never do. Except they did. Several times. While it's never clearly confirmed, it is heavily implied in the document that the Gate Guardian is the angel Uriel guarding the gate to the Garden of Eden, hence the name. The article ends with Site 0, the site monitoring the Guardian, sending a message to the Foundation. The Guardian had left his post, the gate had opened, and the rapture had begun. However, after investigating, the Foundation found that 001 was still at the gate, and those at Site 0 claimed to never send out such a message. The transmission was sent from Site 0, but from the future. When Day Breaks is more of a traditional story than a clinical document. SCP-001 in this proposal is the sun itself. You know that one bit from The History of the Entire World, I guess?
The sun is a deadly laser.
That's basically this SCP. Any living creature caught in the light of the sun will melt into wax and form something of a hive mind with fellow wax monsters. Upon activation, SCP-001 caused billions of casualties and brought about the apocalypse. When day breaks puts you, the reader, in the shoes of one of the survivors. You receive a distress signal and follow it to a bunker. You make your way through the dark, empty corridors and enter an office. There are signs of life, but no one in sight. You open a laptop and listen to an audio log from Dr. Logan Igata. You learn of her romantic relationship with Ari and their time at the site. After that, you watch a video from Logan and, oh god, she went through hell. Somehow, Ari has succumbed to the effects of the sun and is trying to convince Logan to join her. It gets creepy when we see a corrupted SCP-001 file and a candid video of Logan sleeping. Whoever or whatever is holding the camera walks over to Logan and brushes her hair with a black and oily and skeletal hand. No. The final Logan video shows her with thinning hair and sunken eyes. The video ends implying Logan committed suicide. If you still think this SCP has a happy ending, I don't know what to tell ya. The wax monsters break into the bunker and make chase. Despite your best efforts, they grab you and carry you out into the light of the sun. So, yeah, this is a pretty heavy story. It's such a morbid take on the apocalypse and it's downright depressing. Let's change things up with a more wholesome SCP. SCP-999, or the Tickle Monster, is described as a large, amorphous, gelatinous mass of translucent orange slime with a consistency of that of peanut butter. SCP-999 is like a dog. They'll get excited when approached and likes to hug people. 999 tends to gravitate toward people who are hurt in some way, such as those with depression or PTSD. Depressed people have reported having a more positive outlook on life after interacting with 999. To put it bluntly, SCP-999 is living antidepressant. 999 even goes out of its way to risk its life for others, even at one point taking a bullet for someone. As if that wasn't cute enough, they like to eat M&Ms and Naco wafers. 999 is one of the few SCPs that I wish was real, and considering how cute and wholesome he is, can you blame me? SCP-093 is quite a lengthy document. I'll try to go over as much as I can, but we have a lot to cover, so this may take a while. SCP-093, or the Red Sea Object, called as such for it was found in the Red Sea, is a small, red disc that has an affinity for mirrors. If the disc isn't being held in someone's hand, it'll move on its own to find a mirror and stick to it. And this thing is pretty dedicated. The disc will break through walls to find a mirror, so maybe don't stand in its way when it's looking for one. Now for the most interesting part. If you hold the disc in your hand, you can use it to walk through a mirror like a portal to another world. The SCP Foundation has conducted 5 expeditions into the mirror world. The first 3 were carried out by D-Class and led them to a desolate wasteland. There are signs of civilization, but no signs of life. There are quite a few odd things found in the mirror world, such as a smelly brown substance. No, it's not what you think it is. Strange cars with no recognizable controls, capsules with people floating inside, and giant, faceless torsos. The last expedition led a technician to a giant, rotating pillar. Inside were hundreds of copies of 093 in the wall. Communication with the technician was temporarily lost before he returned to the mirror. During debriefing, the technician went berserk and shot several staff members before being shot and killed himself. He didn't bleed, but oozed the brown substance from the mirror world. This begs a question: what happened to the technician in the mirror world when contact was lost? Recovered documents from the mirror world revealed exactly what happened. An interdimensional being claiming to be a god visited the mirror world and said he wasn't happy with the sinners. He told the people of the mirror world to repent before leaving. Whether this was an actual god or a powerful being playing god is up to debate. Regardless, his time in the mirror world has had an impact. The people of the mirror world believed the god and created a chemical called the Lord's Tears for sinners to bathe in to cleanse them of their sins. This explains the people floating in the capsules discussed earlier. Problem is, prolonged exposure to the Lord's Tears results in mutations, which is what the giant torsos are. They are people mutated by prolonged exposure to the Lord's Tears. Eventually, these giant torsos became such a big problem that a militia was created to combat them, but to no avail. The giant torsos overwhelmed the mirror world and led to the collapse of their civilization. Of course, this is a very simplified retelling of the document as a whole. There's a lot more to get into, from the expeditions to the backstory and the recovered items. I'd recommend checking out the original document if you want the full story, or at least watch a video on it. It's pretty lengthy, but worth it. SCP-179 is a humanoid woman floating in space. Her body and hair are matte black, either covered in the substance or made out of it. Over her body are glowing yellow markings from medieval alchemy: gold, mercury, copper, iron, tin, and lead. 179 is super helpful. Every time an extraterrestrial threat approaches the Earth, she points at it. Okay, in all seriousness, there was an instance where she pointed at an asteroid heading to Earth, so the Foundation got to work using SCPs to tow the asteroid away, but that's just one of the many instances of 179 pointing out a threat of some kind. Contact was made with SCP-179 via satellite, where the Foundation learned some interesting things. We also learned that 179 goes by the name Salcazor, she speaks French, and her brother, Sal, is the sun itself. It's implied that Salcazor was born on Earth and somehow became a naked lady floating in space. Salcazor refuses to share her abilities with the Foundation because she, quote, can't belong to one person. This implies that 179 is interested in protecting Earth, but we don't really know why. This makes 179 a rare, benevolent SCP. SCP-173 has some historical significance to it, as it was the very first SCP. Remember the 4chan post I brought up at the beginning? It was about this guy. 173 is commonly compared to the Weeping Angels from Doctor Who, and they both came out around the same time. If you're not looking at them, they turn to stone. They only move when not being observed. When this happens, they try to kill you. SCP-173 differed from the Weeping Angels in that while the angels zap you back in time, SCP-173 snaps your neck. Funnily enough, there was a 2010 episode of Doctor Who that featured the return of the Weeping Angels where they did snap necks.
Your friends, Bob, what did the angel do to them?
Snap their necks, sir.
There has been some controversy over the image for 173. The original image was basically a stolen picture of a sculpture by Japanese artist Izumi Kaito, and I apologize if I butchered that pronunciation. Izumi was fine with his sculpture being used to depict SCP-173 as long as it wasn't monetized since he owned the copyright. Despite this, the decision was made by the wiki to remove the image out of respect for Izumi's original work. The controversy has inspired artists in the community to redesign SCP-173, with my personal favorite being this one from the Unity game remake. Despite everything that has happened, SCP-173 will always be remembered for being the one that started it all, and the original design will always hold a special place in so many hearts, mine included. SCP-682 is one of the few SCPs the Foundation seeks to destroy. SCP-682 is described as a, quote, vaguely reptile-like creature that's straight up immortal. People like to complain that Superman is overpowered, but wait until they hear about 682. 682 can be injured, but he has the ability to regenerate and change his body to survive whatever the Foundation throws at him. The Foundation has tried, and failed, tons of times to kill SCP-682. There's an entire termination log for 682, and look how long it is. Obviously, I don't have the time to go into every termination attempt, so I'll just cover some highlights. One time they put 682 in 173's cell, and 682 was scared of it. 682 stared at the sculpture for 6 hours until snipers shot his eyes out and looked away. When they looked back, they saw 682 gravely injured, and 173 literally had blood on his hands. 682 regenerated and spawned a shit ton of armored eyes and stared at 173 for another 12 hours. Someone wanted to drop SCP-682 out of an aircraft, but it was denied by the O5 Council. Because they hate fun. They straight up put 2 kids in 682's cell. The first kid was terrified shitless and 682 ate him. They drugged the second kid and sent him in, and 682 ate him too. Jesus Christ. They tried to cut 682 in half with a laser, but he went full starfish on everyone and they ended up with 2 682s. They eventually formed back into one, but God, imagine how terrifying 2 682s are. They put 682 in a chamber that allows you to change the laws of physics. Good news, it disintegrated 682. Bad news, the particles from 682 created a new state of matter, and he survived. They tried to send 682 into the mirror world, but he was just spat back out. That was the second attempt by the Foundation to send 682 to another universe. But the most interesting termination attempt has to be with 001, the Gate Guardian. 682 was exposed to the Guardian, who pounded 682 with his sword. 682 was injured, but survived, and smack-talked to 001 the whole time. This is not the Garden. The Garden is far west of here. You are not Uriel, Pretender. You command me to die? Oh, wouldn't we all like that? But this is my curse for suggesting the fruit. Interesting. What could it possibly mean? Probably something, but I'm too lazy to look into it right now. SCP-682 gets a lot of hate for being the most overpowered character in fiction history, but that's what makes 682 so scary. You can't kill him. Also, that doesn't mean 682 can't be an interesting character. 682's nihilism and hatred for humans has led to some interesting lore and stories from the people within the SCP community. Whether the community wants to admit it or not, 682 is one of the most iconic SCPs out there, and people aren't going to stop making content about him anytime soon. SCP-096 is quite possibly one of the most dangerous and terrifying SCPs on the site. SCP-096 is a tall, skinny, pale dude who spends most of his time crying in a cell. If you look at his face, he goes crazy and kills you. Before you get optimistic, this effect works for pictures and videos of 096's face, but it doesn't work for artistic depictions of his face. 096 is pretty dedicated. He has regeneration skills similar to 682, so he'll take a blast from a freaking anti-tank rifle before he gives up on killing you. Just to give you an idea of how terrifying SCP-096 is, Mountain Climber took a picture of himself with 096 way in the background. SCP-096 was only 4 pixels in the image, but regardless, looking at it was enough to trigger 096. 096 breached containment and caused mass destruction. He ran through populated areas, killing God knows how many innocent civilians before killing the mountain climber himself. However, we have a twist on our hands. It's revealed that 2 SCP researchers, Dr. Dan and Dr. Oleski, conspired the entire event. They pleaded with the Foundation to kill 096, but they wouldn't listen. So Dr. Dan was like, why don't we kill a few innocent people? And Dr. Oleski was like, okay. So they staged the photo and planted it in the mountain climber's house and waited. Dr. Oleski spilled the beans and was given the American treatment. Dr. Dan's request to terminate 096 was granted, however, he was to oversee the termination of the creepy bastard, and once he was successful, he was to be terminated. There is no official termination of SCP-096, but SCP Illustrated made a video depicting a hypothetical yet successful termination. Link to the video in the description, but I wouldn't recommend it for the faint of heart. SCP-049 is a humanoid taking the appearance of a medieval plague doctor. Despite appearances, 049 is not wearing clothes. Rather, the robe and mask are part of his body. 049 is determined to cure what he calls the pestilence. What the pestilence is, or even if it's real, are unknown, though there are many theories. 049's attempt to cure the pestilence is by killing those infected and reanimating them as a zombie-like creature. 049 insists that he is curing people, but one can't help but ask what this perceived pestilence is when turning someone into a zombie is considered a cure. The Foundation provided 049 with animal corpses for him to experiment on. He preferred human corpses, but he worked with what he could get. The Foundation was willing to supply 049 until he killed a staff member and reanimated them. Now, no one's allowed to interrogate 049, nor is he to be provided corpses. For a while, SCP-049 was my favorite SCP, and truth be told, I'm not sure why. Don't get me wrong, I'm aware of the reasons I like him. I think the mystery of the pestilence is intriguing, his design is creepy yet cool, and I like the personality he's written with the sense of professionalism, and the Canon voice he has adds to that. The thing that's difficult for me to do is justify why these reasons make him one of my favorites. This is probably one of those instances where I like him just because. It's probably not any deeper than, I think it's cool. 049 is still one of my favorite SCPs, which is evident by his high ranking on my list. However, the title of all-time favorite has changed hands. No longer in possession of SCP-049, my favorite SCP is... The Scarlet King is complicated. Most of the SCPs in this video have been straightforward enough. Just read one document and that's it. With the Scarlet King, however, you need to read multiple documents and piece them together to figure out what the Scarlet King is all about. And remember that the Foundation has no official canon, which means there are some contradictions and pieces that may not fit together. Despite this, I'll do the best I can to summarize this SCP. What better place to start than the beginning? The ancient gods were born with the planting of the Tree of Life. Among them was Karak, who was aware of his existence and thought of it as pain. Karak decided it would be best if he did not exist. He decided it would be best if nothing existed. Karak consumed his siblings and absorbed their power. Filled with pain and hate, Karak declared war against creation and the Creator, adopting the name the Scarlet King. The king laid with another god, Sana, and had 7 daughters with her. These daughters were to give birth to 7 monsters that would aid in the king's war. These 7 monsters would become SCPs. It's never confirmed which SCPs are related to the Scarlet King, but there are theories. Entries such as 682 and 096 have been speculated to be 2 of the monsters, and one of them is even suspected to be SCP-999. This may seem a bit random, but the 7th daughter was different in that she raised a child to oppose the king instead of aiding him. 999 is currently just an infant, but in time, he will grow and become a hero to defeat the Scarlet King. This leads us to SCP-231. A cult loyal to Karak, the children of the Scarlet King, performed rituals on the 7 pregnant girls before a police raid saved them. 24 hours later, one of the girls went into labor and gave birth to a monster, dying in the process. 5 more of the girls gave birth and died, leaving only 1 survivor. The Foundation sought to prevent the girl from giving birth. This is where Procedure 110 Montauk came in. No one exactly knows what 110 Montauk is, as it's written to be a mystery. However, based on some context clues, it can be determined that 110 Montauk is dark and horrific. Personnel carrying out 110 Montauk are to conceal their identities and no record is to be kept of their work on the procedure. Those leaving the site to have their memories wiped as not to deal with the trauma of working on 110 Montauk. There was even an incident where a scientist committed suicide due to the stress of working on the procedure. There are a few theories and interpretations of what 110 Montauk is. However, it can be agreed that the procedure is one of the darkest things the SCP Foundation has ever done for the greater good. And finally, Tufto's SCP-001 proposal. The document displays Dr. Robert Montauk's attempt to understand the Scarlet King through interviews with Dipesh Spivak, former leader of the Children of the Scarlet King, and through his research. During these interviews, Montauk learned about 3 laws: the law of blood, the law of concrete, and the law of howling. The law of blood is about the old ways of bloodshed, fear, chaos, rape, and slavery. The law of concrete is about modern society, about how everything must be studied and observed to be understood. The law of howling is the tension between the first 2 laws. The Scarlet King isn't a physical deity, but an idea that manifests due to this tension. Ironically, the SCP Foundation contributes to this manifestation through its attempt to study and categorize anomalies. As for 110 Montauk, Dipesh was surprised that it worked, because it shouldn't have, but Dipesh eventually figured it out. The procedure wasn't made out of scientific understanding, it was made out of rage to hurt the king. It worked because it fed into fear, following the law of blood. The children of the Scarlet King reject modern society and believe it's better for people to be as they were before. The story ends with Montauk killing Depeche and leaving the Foundation. Montauk decides that it's better to follow a bad path than no path at all, and declares himself a child of the Scarlet King. But again, there is no official SCP canon, so this is just one of the many interpretations of the Scarlet King. With that said, that covers some of the basics of the SCP Foundation, as well as some of my favorite SCPs, but this video barely scratched the surface. I haven't talked about Dr. Bright, joke SCPs, the other 001 proposals, the thousands of other SCPs, and many, many more. I highly recommend looking into the SCP Foundation if this video interested you in any way. Links to the original articles will be provided in the description below, as well as accompanying articles and the SCP Wiki itself. But why am I a fan of the SCP Foundation so much? What makes me so passionate about the subject that I made a video talking about it? Well, there are the basic things, such as the creative SCP concepts, giving us some entries that are fun, mysterious, and or terrifying. There's also the unique approach to storytelling. There are articles that follow a more traditional narrative structure, but SCP is known for the formatted documents that detail the infamous SCPs themselves. But I think the biggest thing that draws me to the SCP Foundation is its mission statement: secure, contain, protect. If 110 Montauk proves anything, it's that the Foundation will do whatever it takes to keep SCPs in its custody, contained, and away from the masses. There's a lot of gray area when discussing the ethics of the Foundation's methods. These elements not only make the SCP Foundation unique, but interesting and thought-provoking, and I think that's why I'm a fan of the SCP Foundation. With that said, that's all for me for today, so come by next time. Can't wait to see you there. Until then, EB out.